the facilities, or you want to?
It's in the middle. Yes.
Okay, great.
大丈夫大丈夫です。
Jamie, are folks joining from Meeting 5 in London? Is that what we're
Brett
expecting?
will likely join.
It's just on the way.
Yep. And so this section is a legal and compliance review. And so our general counsel, Paula Drake, will lead that discussion. And I have additional materials, Paula, so when you're ready for me to distribute them, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Well, lovely to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. As Jamie said, I'm Paula Drake. I'm the General Counsel. I've been here just over a year this week. And with me today, I have Elisa Gorin, who's a senior member of our legal team, and Danielle Green, who's our Chief Compliance Officer, and Matt Daugert, who's another senior counsel in our legal team. So we thought we would begin by describing our legal and compliance function and enter into discussions on some of the finer points of that function. So we have a global, integrated, and experienced legal team. You can see it on page 4. Here we are. We have a independent and really empowered compliance function, which is extremely important part of that regulatory function. We really think of our legal and regulatory function as one of the primary building blocks of the operations of the firm, as supporting the fundamental business of the firm. We think about our foundation of this firm really in 3 ways. We have investments, we have investor relations, and we have operations. And what I'd like to stress is that operations is equally important as the other 2, and the legal and compliance function is an empowered and important part of the operations. Our mission is really to help the business grow and sustain the business, but in a safe way. So from a very strong regulatory foundation with good legal advice. We have been in business, as you know, for 35 years as a dedicated private equity manager focused on private equity. And in that entire 35-year period, we've had no regulatory issues, and we've had no litigation against the firm or our funds. Our last SEC exam in 2014 really, I would say, continued that tradition because we had, no major deficiencies, no material issues, a very clean exam. In my experience, I've had, as a former chief counsel to the examinations and compliance division at the SEC, I've seen literally thousands of exams, and ours was among the best. But we are not complacent about that. And so we really regard our legal and regulatory function as something that is organic. It is under continual observation by us and enhancement and improvement, and thinking of it in terms of really a partnership with the business and how we can help the business continue to grow from a safe foundation. Compliance here and regulatory soundness really starts at the top of the firm. We hear a lot about tone at the top, and that's a cliche, but at HarborVest it's really true. And so that compliance and legal advice is really integrated throughout the firm, and it really starts at the top of the firm. So the Executive Management Committee, Pete and John, really message and support compliance to the rest of the firm. And in addition, and I'll get into more detail about this, legal and compliance participate throughout the governance of the firm at the highest levels of the firm and on some of the most important committees of the firm. So the next slide. Yes.
May I quickly ask this team? You mentioned you joined about a year ago.
Yes.
Yes. So for better understanding, who was your predecessor and how you so joined? So you asked to join to enhance the team, for example, or predecessor unfortunately depart and you need to succeed. And also, so is there any specific function allocation among legal team and compliance team, or rather all the team is involved in all the operation points, for example, and also how you have been increased in numbers in terms of this size of team. So it expanded recently, or so have been continuously growing in numbers. So
Okay.
quick overview of your team structure.
Okay, yes, thank you. Those are great questions. So in terms of succession, when I arrived at HarborVest, the legal and compliance function was overseen by Mary Trayer, who you'll be meeting if you haven't met already. And she is the Chief Administrative Officer of the firm and a very highly experienced specialist in tax. And, as you know, tax is such a critical component of the structuring of funds and the analysis of legal questions that, and Mary had she was here for so long and she had such a broad understanding of the operations of the firm that she ran that legal function. I think, there was an understanding that as the firm, a victim of its own success, that as it grew, there was enough that we needed, HarborVest needed a general counsel, so a specialist on legal and regulatory. And so I joined about a year ago, but Mary did not leave. Mary's still here. When I joined, we worked very, very closely together on really a long transition period, I would say 6 months, where we worked together with the team and on issues, beginning to think about how we were going to further enhance and develop the program. And that has not stopped. We still collaborate. We collaborate on various leadership initiatives together. We both sit on the executive leadership team, which is the executive management committee's leadership team, giving them advice and supporting the strategic initiatives of the firm. Mary frequently, we'll be working with her on questions that arise in structuring funds, raising funds, investment questions on deals that come up in terms of tax, on processes in terms of operations that go throughout the firm. Mary runs a committee called the Ops Leaders Committee, Operations Leaders Committee. I am part of that. So we continue. There was no actual break in succession. We continue as collaborators and partners in terms of the operational functions of the business. In terms of our legal team, so when I got here, I think there were about 9 people. We're now 12 with me. So the firm has added considerably and globally. And when I said that compliance and kind of respect and the strength of compliance starts at the top of the firm, part of that is that the firm has really been committed to investing in compliance and legal. And so we have offered, Matt joined us recently, for example, more than, I think, 14 years of experience in the industry with other managers and in law firms. We have added a compliance, the head of compliance for Asia, Sharon Tsai, who's on this page. Jamie Correa joined us in the UK. Jesse Whalen joined us from a major law firm, Kirkland & Ellis, has a stellar academic background, as most of our professionals do. So there's been tremendous support for increasing and enhancing the function and growing the team. So we are now 12. We were, I think, roughly 9. We are actively now looking for 4 more people. So again, continuing that investment in regulatory and compliance. And the 4 people that we are looking for will include both compliance people in the UK as well as the US, and also senior legal counsel in the UK. I think that answers the three questions.
And maybe I'll just add, Paul, philosophically, as Paul suggested, we went as a firm from having people who were dedicated in part to a number of the legal issues, such as Mary, and working very closely with an outside legal firm, Debevoise and Plimpton. They continue to be our outside counsel on whom we rely. But we made a decision 3 years ago that both on the legal and on the compliance side, we needed to enhance our in-house capabilities and talent. And that led us to Paula, and we were fortunate to be able to attract her, given she's got a perfect mix of both legal and regulatory experience in her own background. And to Paula's point, she put together a proposal that John and I reviewed in the fourth quarter or so of last year as to what the needs of the firm would be going forward. And we've backed that with the resources needed to enhance our internal capabilities. Last thing I would say is a lot of this is driven by client need. The reality is the regulatory environment that clients operate in, let alone ourselves, as well as their expectation for expertise has risen. And we've had to and have willingly gone to enhance that capability to address it from our own resources.
Yeah, and thank you, Pete. And I also want to address another aspect of what you asked, how I came here. You asked how I came here. So I was not looking for a position. I had, after I finished as chief counsel to the Examinations and Compliance Division at the SEC, I went to OXIF as their global chief regulatory counsel. And that was a very interesting and challenging job. To really build a program there, focused both on hedge fund and private equity. But when a search firm reached out to me about HarborVest, I really had to look at it because it's an amazing firm with such a stellar reputation and such a interesting and challenging business. And also, to me, the most important thing really is the ethical culture and the people of the firm. And I wanted to spend, the rest of my career with people like that, who were building a business from an incredibly strong ethical foundation. And so I'm delighted that I did come, and I'm gratified that the firm, we talked a lot before I came, before I made the decision about the firm's vision of supporting legal and compliance and supporting the growth of the firm by continuing to invest in that foundation. And they have done everything they said they would do. So, with that vision.
Thank you.
And you also asked about how we think of organizing and kind of dividing legal and compliance. If you look at slide 5 here, it really gives you a picture of that. So the first thing I always think about when people ask about legal versus compliance is that, to my mind, in some ways they are seamless. It's all regulatory advice. When we have lawyers embedded on deal teams giving advice about transactions, that is regulatory advice as well as legal advice, because it's making sure that we comply with the law and we're reaching the right solutions that will, prevent any kind of issue from arising. Same thing when we're working on addressing what are the right policies and procedures for the firm in terms of supporting our code of ethics, our cybersecurity, our gifts and entertainment, political contributions, fees and expense allocation, investment allocation, everything else full on. But that being said, even though I would say it is all legal and compliance advice, at the same time it makes sense to organize and to structure. So the way we think of our legal and compliance function is that we have regulatory soundness, which is essentially overseen by compliance. We have supporting product development, marketing, raising funds, investor relations, supported both by legal and compliance. We have supporting the investment function, and we have supporting the ongoing maintenance of the management company. And we can get specific about some of this. So, for example, on the compliance side, compliance thinks a lot about what is the appropriate governance for the firm in terms of making sure that we have the right decision makers and the right structure to ensure escalation of issues and a lot of transparency internally as well as externally around how we solve issues. So compliance is very involved in both crafting the governance around committees and issues, but also being involved in that. So, for example, Danielle she participates on the Global Investment Committee, which, as you know, looks at every investment opportunity and allocation for our firm's clients. Danielle sits on the Allocation Committee, which looks at the allocation of scarce investment opportunities. Danielle is also an advisor to the Conflicts Committee, which consists of the Executive Management Committee, and I also advise on that committee, and looks at other kinds of conflicts that arise from transactions or from fee and expense allocation or other areas of the firm. Danielle is also on the Cybersecurity Committee, ensuring that our processes and our cyber protections are consistent with what the SEC expects to see and what are best practices in the industry. So, as well as participating in a number of other initiatives. So, compliance is integrated and involved in the governance of the firm. Compliance is also involved in looking at all of our policies and procedures and ensuring that they are best practices, not just sufficient, but best practices to ensure that we comply with the law. We're continually reviewing our disclosure to make sure that we do what we say we do and that the disclosure is comprehensive and clear. And that's under continual enhancement. Compliance looks at our documentation and makes sure that we've documented our approach and our resolution of issues. And in also delivering and developing training. And our philosophy of training, it's worth saying, it's not just sort of big and annual. That's important that you reach the entire firm annually, but it's also bespoke and targeted so that we meet with individual investment teams and individual employees in the firm and different groups in the firm globally to ensure that our training is very specific and delivered to their issues. And then, in addition to that, compliance is involved in testing. And we do both internal testing to ensure that we've complied with our policies and procedures, but also external third-party testing. So, for example, the SOC 1, which is conducted by auditors, ensures that our investment allocation policies have been complied with, that we have complied with them, as well as our fee and expense allocation.
Speaking of a SOC 1 report, as one of our consultants might have asked earlier, so why the latest report was the scope or the time frame of the latest SOC 1 report is 9 months, ended in September rather than December.
Danielle, do you know the answer to that?
And also,
question?